Thank you, everybody, for attending today's session. My esteemed colleague, Brent Ward, is here, and he's from Molecular Testing Labs. He's the facility manager there, and he's also on the board of directors here with our chapter and serves on the nonprofit council as vice president. Yep. And Brent also works a lot with our emerging professionals. Additionally, he has the FMP and SFP. And if you could complete a survey after this class, he's working to become an Ifma certified instructor so we could have a lot of in-house trainings, which would be great. So with no further ado, Brent.
Well, I'm sure that we all are familiar with indoor air quality. Back in the 70s, during the energy crisis, they sealed up all of our buildings, made them airtight, and then made us shove more air in them. I'm not sure how spending more energy on more air in was energy savings back in the 70s, but that's what they thought. So that's where we're at. Now we've got DOAS systems we have to put in our buildings. All of these things came up, and we thought we were good, and then COVID hit. So now it's not just having clean air with no particulate in it. We also have to have air with no pathogens in it. So how do we do that? What are the technologies out there? What do we need to do to get clean air? So we need to ask ourselves as facilities managers, in my built environment, what am I trying to eliminate? How am I trying to enhance my air? How many preventative maintenance schedules do I want to add to my team's list by making cleaner air? What's the cost of ongoing maintenance of whatever I decide to put in to give me cleaner air? What does science say versus the spec sheet? Spec sheets can tell you anything they want to say. And do I want fixed or portable units, passive or active systems? What do I want to do? Well, the difference between passive and active. Passive is something that moves air through a unit and cleans the air as it comes through by running it through filters, lights, whatever the case might be. Active treats the air while it's still out in the room. So two different forms of cleaning, and all those technologies are out there. In order to have passive air cleaning, you have to have a lot of air changes, a lot of CFM blowing through your room to get that. The red line is older buildings and what they need. They need at least 6 air changes per hour. Or, my eyes are really bad, 40 air changes an hour to have 99% pathogen-free air. The green line is what new buildings have to have, a minimum of 12 air exchanges per hour. So that means bigger equipment, more maintenance, and how do we get that air pathogen-free? Well, do we want to purify the air or do we want to disinfect the air? More choices. If we want to purify it, then we can remove solids, small liquids, by running it through a filter and catching it. If we want to disinfect it, we have to eliminate or make the pathogens inert so that they're no longer viable and they can't cause us any harm. So what are the major players right now in this industry? Well, there's FAR UVC 222, there's also UVC 254, there's HEPA, bipolar ionization, activated carbon, ozone generators, and advanced active photocatalytic oxidation, AAPO we'll call it, because I'm not saying that anymore. It's way too long. So what we're going to do now is go through those major players. We're going to examine them one by one. We'll look at what they can do, what they can't do, and we'll find that there is not just one player that fits all of our needs. Every built environment has different needs. You might want to be virus-free in your air, but you might also have an odor issue because you're a manufacturing facility. Maybe there's the smell of hydraulic fluid, whatever the case might be. So you have to decide what you're going to do, what's best for your environment. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll be confused. No, you'll have things more clear as to what type of device you need in your environment. So FAR UVC, the 222 nanometer, it'll destroy pathogens. Direct exposure to humans is safe. It can disinfect large areas as an active system, and it'll kill 95% of the pathogens in 11 minutes. It's pretty quick cleaning. So if you leave that system on 24/7, it will handle the load in the morning when people come into work because the air in their building will already be perfectly clean by the time they get there, and it'll handle them as they come into the building. UVC 254, same basic things, but it's harmful to humans. Direct exposure is harmful to humans. But it's still a valuable tool. It's used extensively in hospital operating theaters. They'll go through, they'll disinfect, they'll clean the room, they'll bring one of these units in, turn it on, the timer goes on, you get out of the room, it blasts the room with UV light, disinfects everything, kills everything in the room, and then you go back in and haul it out and you have another operation. So it has its value, but you cannot be exposed to it. HEPA, it's been around since forever. World War I, gas masks. World War II and gas masks. So it's been around for about 100 years, but it's a filter. So it's a filter type system. It will do 99.97% of the particulate in the air. Coronavirus is small enough that it will catch it in the filter. Hospitals have used them for years to try to reduce viral infections and bacteria. It doesn't remove odors, gases, things of that nature. Smaller viruses, smaller bacteria will go right through the filters. But you have to remember that filter-trapped viruses are not dead viruses. They're still live. They can still reproduce, and as the filter gets full and the air is coming through, it can push them through and back out into the air again. And when you remove the filter, what are you doing? You're shaking the filter, and what's coming out? More virus. It's just a consideration. Bipolar ionization. That creates ions that attach themselves to the viruses and basically makes them heavy and drops them out of the air. Well, now you're not breathing it, but you're touching it as you're leaning on that table right there. So do you want that? Is that something that you want in your built environment? It's still live, it just weighs more, kind of like me. It cannot kill all viruses. It cannot take out all odors, but it does have a place, it does have a purpose. One issue with bipolar ionization is that it can, in high amounts, be hazardous to humans. It can create oxidation that could be harmful in some built environments. Activated carbon, that's been around for a lot of years as well. That too is something where the air has to pass through and capture, but it will basically only capture odors. It cleans smells out of the air, and that's about all. Some viruses will get caught by accident, but it's not designed for that. The filtering medium is not tight enough to catch viruses and pathogens. So it has a minimal effect on those. But if you have odors you need to get rid of, it's the best thing out there. Well, second best. Ozone generators are even better. Ozone generators will really handle odors effectively. It is a reactive oxidant. So the problem with that is you can get too much of it. Ozone can give you cold-like symptoms, sore throat, runny eyes, irritated eyes. So you have to be careful the amounts that you put into the air. So it can actually cause damage to humans because it is an allergen, and we do react to it. But it also has no effect on solid particles, such as allergens. So it's a balancing act. That's what we're finding, right? It's a balancing act. What do you need to clean out of the air in your built environment, and what's best for you? Advanced, I said I wasn't going to say it again, but going to one more time. Advanced active photocatalytic oxidation, AAPO. This too is an oxidative, but it is not harmful. It treats the air in the air, not running through a machine. And it reacts with portions of the viruses that render them inert. They're no longer a virus. So, and they don't fall out of the air. They're still in the air. We just filter them out through our normal breathing process. It doesn't remove dust or other allergens, but it also disinfects the surfaces, something that UV light does, but only UV light and this process actually clean the surfaces. So how wonderful is that? If you're concerned about viruses and whatever the next pandemic is going to be, what a wonderful system to have, to be able to not only not worry about that you're touching something that's going to give you the disease, but also that you're not going to breathe anything that's going to give you a disease or a virus. It can be included with others. It can be sandwiched in, so you can have a HEPA filter and a carbon filter and AAPO and get everything all combined. So now you're getting particulate out of the air, you're getting odor out of the air, and you're getting the viruses and bacteria out of the air. So what's best for you? Well, let's look at all of these kind of at a glance and take a look. Kind of gives you the idea of where you need to be. Do you need active treatment or passive treatment? Are you trying to clean odors, or are you trying to clean particulate out of the air? Are you trying to clean pathogens out of the air? We can see that 3 of those have potential hazards, and so that plays into your decision-making process. What are you replacing? Are you replacing anything? Are you enhancing? If you want to, a lot of people have thought about putting UV in their HVAC system, in their ductwork, as a means of killing the pathogens and doing it that way. But at 400 CFM, which is what the average HVAC system runs air through the ducts at, you would have to have a minimum of 20 lineal feet of UV light to have enough dwell time for the viruses for it actually to kill the virus before it got into your building. How many of you have 20 lineal feet of straight ductwork in your building? You do? Okay. You're a rarity. Most people don't. Most people don't have that kind of length. And then the question arises, what's already in the ductwork beyond that UV light that you're still blowing out into your room? So there's a balancing act there as to what you need to do. Replacement parts. How many PMs do you want to add to your team? Do you want to be replacing filters every month or every quarter or whatever the various filters might require? Do you want to be replacing lights, UV lights on a regular basis? What's best for you and your team and your built environment? All questions that need to be asked. Do you want to clean just the air? Do you want to clean the surfaces as well, or disinfect the surfaces as well? Choices that have to be made. So these are the questions that only you can answer as an FM. It's your environment. You know what you've got. What are you trying to eliminate? How clean do you want the air? Do you want it disinfected? Do you just want particulate out, just odors out? What do we want to add to our list of to-dos? Because all of us will probably, if I said how many of you are shorthanded, would raise your hand so fast that we would create a breeze in the room. What is the cost of the ongoing maintenance? How much do the filters cost? I'll tell you that a typical HEPA filter has gone up more than 300% in the last 3 years. Why? Because it can. Because demand went high. So, yes, maybe you bought HEPA filters early on in COVID and things were cheap, but they're not cheap anymore. That filter's costing you as much as the HEPA unit did when you bought the HEPA unit, probably. What does science say? Spec sheets are great. You can compare spec sheets all day long and come up with what you feel is the best unit for you. But is there scientific evidence to back what they're saying? It's easy to run a test in your laboratory with your device, whatever one of those it might be, and put in a fixed amount of a virus or particulate or odor in a fixed size device and say, well, in 9 minutes it cleaned that up. But what does science say about how that works in the real built environment? How many of those devices have had independent studies by independent laboratories that you can look at and say, this is real. It does it in a built environment. There are actually no studies, no independent scientific studies on HEPA filters, on ozone generators, ion generators, in how well they work. It is all done by the manufacturers themselves. There's no federal regulations. There's no guidelines for that. They can make claims based on what they did with a 12 by 12 by 12 box and how fast their unit cleaned that up and say that will work in your 20,000 square foot building. There are scientific studies on one of those, independent scientific studies, dozens of them, where they took buildings that had installed one type of filtration system to get rid of pathogens, and they did studies of air and surfaces and determined the amount of pathogens. And then they brought in the AAPO system, let it run for 7 days to fully saturate the air, redid studies of those same surfaces, the same air, and found huge decreases in the amount of pathogens in the air. Independent scientific studies. So that's what we need to look at. If we're going to be the heroes at where we work, we need to make sure that the science we choose, the technology we choose, is truly going to do what we're telling the C-suite it's going to do, and it needs to be verifiable. You can find devices out there that have sensors on them that will continually tell you how they're operating and what they're doing. But they don't tell you how clean the air is, just that they're operating and their filter's not dirty. So there's all kinds of options out there. What's best for your environment? Only you can determine that. Any questions?
Do you guys collaborate?
Go ahead.
Do you guys collaborate with any other organizations like AIA, ASHRAE, and some of the other ones that are focusing some of the fancier things that we talked about, the filters and the testing?
The AAPO, the persons who make AAPO, which by the way, AAPO was originally designed to be on the space, it is on the space station. To clean the air on the space station, they've now developed that for us Earthlings. Yes, they have had studies done by a couple, I can't remember which ones. I think it was, I can't remember, I don't want to say the wrong thing. So they have had studies done by those organizations to prove the efficacy of their devices.
Yeah, some of our task force at ASHRAE would like to be involved. That's what I was curious if you collaborate with the national level.
Yep.
But I'll chat with you.
Okay.
I had a statement. So I have a lot of buildings that have the 6 per hour, and when COVID hit, everyone's like MERV 13, all that. It would kill the system because you're blocking the airflow. You can't put that amount of filtration in existing. So that's why I was looking at UV as a possible solution. But I was looking at UV in the supply trunks, as I thought. But then you're just telling me the 20 feet, is that codified somewhere in a study where they need that amount of feet?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is, yep. And somewhere I've got that reference, I can get
Because
it.
I thought that was my magic bullet for a minute, but.
Yeah, and that's a valid point. Everybody wanted to rush out and put MERV 11s, MERV 13s, because MERV 13s are similar to HEPA. But like you said, the back pressure on your system, you'll blow it up. You can't just go throwing heavy filters in there and make it work. One of the other issues with air quality devices, filtration systems, or UV or AAPO is placement. You can't just go throw a portable HEPA filter anywhere in the room and have it do its job. If it's directly under a return air duct, then everything that blows out is going to go right up the return air duct, and it's not doing you any good. So strategic placement of the device has as much bearing on how well it cleans the air as the device itself does. UV light is generally put at least 8 foot in the air so that you can't look directly into it, and it encompasses the ceiling, and then as the air comes in through the registers, it cleans the air, and that's how it worked. The AAPO devices, they are also ceiling mounted. They just drop in, they're a 2x2 square, they drop into the ceiling. They're passive and they will clean the air as well. And so a lot of people have found that, like Bobby, since you can't put a MERV 13 in most HVAC systems, they're not designed for it, that you have to have other means of cleaning and purifying, disinfecting your air. So there are options. Now you know a couple of them. Any other questions? Go ahead, Bobby.
Nobody's ever accused me of needing a microphone, but we'll see. You have a very rational approach to this whole subject, which I applaud. And I wonder, in your personal opinion, is there a line, does this thing just keep going? We keep making air quality better and better and better and better? Is there trade-offs? Is there a point where we're trying too hard to make this? And here's where the sweet spot is, and we all accept it. Just kind of what are your thoughts on this whole movement? And, you know, obviously we all want great, clean air quality. But you just listed out a whole bunch of examples where that maybe is difficult or doesn't make a lot of sense. You're trading off a lot of the other things. What's your personal opinion on just kind of that line? Without getting in too much trouble.
It's a fine line. It's a fine line to how much money do you spend to get what results? In my opinion, if you're going to spend money to get disinfected air, I'm not even going to go into cleaning the air with particulate and odors is easy. If you're going to try and disinfect your air, there needs to be a payback. If your employees are saying, I'm not coming back to work unless I know the air is clean, there you go. You haven't got a choice. And it's not expensive either. That's what's amazing, is it's not that expensive of technology to make it happen. I think that it all depends, I think, on what happens in the next 12 months or so with COVID and on how this is going to settle out and settle down. I've seen in talking with some reps from various companies that they're seeing an ebb and flow. When numbers start to go up in COVID, companies start to look at it again because people start to get itchy and they want to know what's going on, and so they want cleaner air. So I think that we're going to see it even out. It'll continue to be a thing. It won't be as big of a priority as it has been because of COVID, but I think that companies don't want to go through this again. If you can have pathogen-free air in the workplace, then the next pandemic that comes along, your workplace is going to be clean. You don't have to stay home. Your office can continue to function because you can document that your air is pathogen-free. So that is going to come into play for a lot of corporations and companies who want to continue to operate and not have this problem we had when COVID hit.
Don't go willing another pandemic in your universe.
You know, we thought monkeypox was going to be it there for a while, the way they were talking. We were just waiting on that one to hit. But, you know, I mean, we don't know what's coming down the pike, and, you know, COVID keeps morphing itself and coming up with some new version. So I think it's always going to be a topic, but I think that it's going to cool and settle down.
Most of the stuff that I've seen, at least in the San Francisco Bay Area, because we have better, most of the stuff I've seen in the Bay Area, it's diluting the air, basically pumping more air, which of course is an energy penalty. So that's what most of the tech companies, that's what they were doing.
And that's something that you've got to look at too. You know, yeah, we can go back to that slide on air turns, you know. Do the calculations. If you've got 100,000 cubic feet in your building and 400 CFM, and you've got to have, let me go back to that slide. You know, and you've got to have 35 turns in an hour, how much equipment do you have to have on your roof? It's going to be a wind tunnel in that building by the time you get there, to that number. Yeah. Yeah. So then exactly. So now your front doors are open because there's so much air pressure in the building. That's not a solution either. So I think that's why some of these technologies have come to the fore as they have, is because, especially the active ones, because they're not creating additional air pressure. They're treating the air as it comes in from the existing HVAC system with the existing filters. So we have to look at energy usage too. We're all trying to get greener, and carbon reporting is going to become a big thing here soon. Do we want to add something that's going to double our energy usage in our HVAC system? I don't. So anything with a motor, anything with a fan, is going to be high energy usage as opposed to something that's active. So that has to be considered in our decision as well, is preventative maintenance costs, filter costs, light bulb costs, energy costs. All of those things have to be considered in whatever solution we need. Now, in some cases, such as odor removal, you haven't got a choice. The only thing out there is activated carbon or ozone. Both of them require a lot of electricity. But for viruses, there are options out there that are very, very, very minimal in energy usage. So, Danae?
Manager, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I'm curious. So with the ongoing hot weather that we're having and the ongoing fire season that's longer every year, it seems like, how does the outdoor poor air quality factor into that? If you're not supposed to be recycling the same air all day, but you can't pull it in from outside because it's now hazardous some days, then what?
Welcome to my world. Yeah, it was a booger a couple of years ago when we had all those fires because we were in the middle of COVID as well. CDC said, open up your outdoor air, 100% outdoor air, bring it in, flush it out, flush everything out of your building. Great, now I'm bringing in smoke and particulate and all of that stuff. And like Bobby said, I can't go run up there and put MERV 11s or MERV 13s on my system. It'll kill it. So what do? Sometimes you have to bring in temporarily something to take the odor out of the air. You might have to bring in some activated carbon filtration system just so people can breathe. I know we've gone back to normal economizer mode now. We're no longer doing 100% outside air. We think COVID's gone to that point. We can get that way. So that will help come fire season if we have fires again. But even then, you're still going to be bringing in some outside air because you're right. You can't shut down your outside air. People can't breathe in that kind of a stuffy environment. So
some of these systems that you're talking about, is there an outdoor air monitor on there? Like, can you then tell it when the outdoor air gets to this particulate count, then you're no longer bringing in outside air, now you're reverting to?
Yes, there are sensors out there that will do that. They are not a normal part of an HVAC system, but they can be added, yes, and shut down your outside air for that point in time.
The aspect I liked about the UV application was because it's not capital. And so if you didn't have capital to spend, but you still wanted to your point, finding the solution for the application you need, then it's perfect because you can spend OpEx to solve the problem. So. Yep,
exactly. And that the 254, the one that's harmful to humans, it was used a lot, not only in hospitals, but a lot of school districts used it. They'd run that thing through every room at night, the custodians, because in about 5 minutes, it'll clean a classroom, totally disinfect the classroom. So the custodians would go in and clean a room, throw that thing in there, turn it on, walk out, go clean the next room, go grab it and suck it into the next room, and just keep going on. So that every morning when the students came back, the rooms were disinfected. So it has a lot of good uses, and you're right, it's not CapEx, so you can afford it and use it, and you can justify it. The last company that I worked for, we're an education facility, and we purchased the AAPOs for our classrooms because it was just ridiculous, the number of absentees in students and in staff. And then you get too much staff gone, then you can't open your classroom. So we put those in the classrooms, and I haven't seen the numbers because before the numbers came in, I quit and left and went somewhere else. But I'm being told by people that are there that they have now purchased additional units to put in the corridors and other areas of the buildings because they saw such a tremendous decrease in absenteeism because people weren't getting sick. The air was clean, the surfaces were clean. It was a Head Start program, so you can imagine a bunch of snotty little kids running around touching everything and everybody touching it, and the environment it's a petri dish. But it cleaned up. Anything else? Well, thank you all. I appreciate it. I'm going to... Bobby, pass those down. Appreciate if you would fill out the survey. Appreciate the feedback. You all have got 10 minutes back of your lives.